In the last lesson, we focused on styling our listed NFTs, checking to see whether if an NFT is listed, and generally handling a lot of the UI updates to improve the user experience of the listing and selling of NFTs on our website. Now in this lesson, I want to focus on getting this Discover page to work so that all the listed NFTs can show up in here in a tile fashion, similar to what we had in My NFTs. That basically means that we're going to be reusing this gallery component and passing it some different IDs as props. To begin, we're going to have to look inside our header because this is the point where we actually have diverging paths. Because when we head over to the collection route, we're going to pass over the user-owned gallery, which is a gallery that we've set up with the NFT IDs from the current user's owned NFTs. Now, at the moment for the Discover path, all it has is just an H1. So we're going to delete that and we're going to replace it with the listing gallery. And again, we'll need to add a constant up here. And we're going to update it inside our getNFTs function. So we're going to create a constant called the listed NFT IDs. And at the moment, we don't actually have a function in our main.matoku, our OpenD, that handles grabbing hold of all the listed NFT IDs. So let's go ahead and do that right now. Head into the main.matoku, and I'm going to scroll up to find a section that's sort of somewhat related, where we've got the get owned NFTs, and below it, I'm going to add a function that will get our listed NFTs. Let's create a new public query func, and it's going to be called get listed NFTs, and it's going to not take any inputs, but it is going to return an array of principal IDs, which will be the principals of all of the NFTs that are listed. Now we're going to be looking through our map of listings, and we're going to be using a function in the hash map which is called keys, which basically returns us an iter, which is a Matoku data type of all the keys in this hash map. So we're going to say map of listings dot keys and then parentheses, and with these keys we're going to turn it into an array using the iter data type. So we first have to import it in order to use it. And we already worked with the iter previously when we looked at how to persist hash maps. So now we're going to use, again, that really handy method from iter, which is called toArray. And we're going to pass in this thing that's iteratable, which is our keys from our map listings. And I'm going to set this to a constant, which I'll call IDs. And that is what we're going to be returning from this method. So now with this new method, getListedNFTs, we can go back to our header.jsx, call await OpenD dot, and then paste in the name of that method call. It doesn't take any inputs, so we can just cap it off like this. And then we can console log these IDs just to make sure that it actually does work. And finally, we're going to set our gallery, set listing gallery, not owned gallery anymore. And we're going to set it to a new gallery component. And we're going to pass in some props. So the title is going to be equal to Discover. The IDs is going to be equal to our listed NFT IDs. And then finally, we can add our / and closing angle bracket to close off our gallery component. This basically passes the buck over to our gallery. And if we go ahead, just deploy our canister again, remember you can find the code in the README and simply just copy and paste it. I'm always a little bit paranoid about the methods not updating, so I'm always watching this opend.did to make sure that the new update, which is that new method we created, get listed NFTs, actually gets added, which it did, so that worked successfully. Now, once that's all done, then we can go and mint a new NFT. Which we're going to list for sale. And if we now head over to our Discover page, you can see that listed NFT showing up. And just to make sure that it's actually correctly working, I'm going to mint yet another NFT, which I won't list for sale, and you can see the difference between my NFTs and Discover. So if you get this, that means our code is working correctly. So we're able to view our listed NFTs, but we want to change the item a little bit because we don't want it to be blurred when it's being shown on the Discover page. We actually want people to buy it, to be able to see it. And we also want to add a buy button. So we need some sort of way of identifying when the Discover page is being rendered and when the collection page is being rendered. Let's go ahead and add another prop when we create our gallery component. And this I'm going to call role. So the first role for the My NFTs, I'm going to pass as the collection. And the second role I'm going to set as Discover. And now in our gallery, we can simply just pass those props over. So role equals props.role, and that's going to pass them straight over to our item, which is where we're actually going to care a bit more about this. Now, everything we've done here so far, below where we've set the image, set the owner, set name, is pretty much only for our My NFT page. So we can say if the props.role is equal to collection, and make sure that you don't have any typos between here and where you set it in the header. Then we're going to perform all of these functions like so. But else if our props.role is equal to discover, well, in that case, we're going to do something a little bit different. And what we want to do here is we want to set the button to say buy instead, because that's the purpose of the Discover page. So we're going to change the text to buy, and instead of passing over a method called handle sell, we're going to pass over a method called handle buy, which means we have to create it as well. So let's create our async function handle buy, and simply just console log that buy was triggered. Like this. Now let's check to see if it actually works. You can see on the Discover page, we've got our item and it says buy. On our My NFT page, if there's an item that can be sold, it has the sell button. If it has an item that's already listed, then it doesn't have a sell button because it's already been sold and listed. So notice here, it's actually showing us the buy button for an item that we listed ourselves, right? So we're actually the original owner of this NFT. But because we had to temporarily transfer it over to OpenD to be able to list it, we should not be able to buy our own NFT back. That makes no sense in terms of the logic. So we're going to have to do some checks and balances in our Discover section here. And what we're most interested in is actually the original owner. So not the current owner, which is going to be OpenD's canister ID, but the actual original owner, which we know is ourselves. And we can do this by creating a method in our main.matoku. So it's going to be a public query func, and I'm going to call it get original owner. And it's going to require us to pass in the principal ID of the actual NFT, and we're going to return the principal ID of the original owner of the NFT. Remember that previously when we added items into our map of listings, it was a hash map with keys made up of the principal ID of the NFT, and then values were these listing types, which contains the item owner's principal and the item price. So we can tap into that by getting hold of the actual listing by passing over the item ID. Similar to previously when we were working with optionals, we're going to have to use the switch statement to unwrap it. So I'm going to create a var for getting hold of the listing, which is going to be of data type listing. And I'm going to switch on the map of listings and calling the get on the ID that's passed in here. And once I've got my switch statement, I've got the case null, which means that this particular ID, which we found in our map of listings, doesn't actually correspond to any NFTs. Well, then we're going to simply return a empty principal. But otherwise, we're going to unwrap the result. And then we're going to return the listing dot item owner. So now coming back to our front end, we can check to see who the original owner is by doing await opend dot and then the name of our method, which is get original owner, passing in props.id, the ID of the current NFT. Now we're going to check if the original owner's principal, once it's converted to text, is not equal to the current logged in user, which remember we're exporting and keeping hold of in here in our index.jsx. That way we don't have to deploy our canister and we don't have to deal with login flow. So we have to import that over to our item.jsx right here. So if you start typing current user ID, let's hit enter, then it should import it for you. And we're going to again turn that into text. So we're going to use toText to compare like with like. And if it is the case that the original owner is not the current owner, then we should be able to see the buy button. So let's go ahead and make sure that we save our main.motoko file so that it goes from the italic to non-italic font. And then we're going to deploy our canister again using our long-winded deployment code from our README, just so that all our latest updates are reflected. Now, once our canisters are all deployed, we want to be able to test it out on the front end, but we have a problem here because we're only able to mint NFTs from the front end as ourselves. So we will never be able to see that buy button because the original owner of the NFT is always going to be ourselves, the user. So how do we get around that? Well, that's why we have the command line. In order to test this, I want you to head over to the README, and if you scroll down, you'll see a section called Creating NFT for Testing. Here, we're going to mint an NFT on the command line to get into the map of NFTs. And once that comes back, it'll come back with a ID of the newly minted NFT. So we're going to copy everything that's in between the double quotes, and I want you to replace what it says here on step 2, list the item into map of listings, with that ID that you got back. So make sure that you remove the angle brackets and all you're left with is just something that looks like this. Now go ahead and copy it on the preview if you don't want to accidentally copy these backstrokes. So let's copy that and paste it in here. And once we list the item and it comes back success as well, and then we're going to go to step 3 where we get hold of OpenD's canister ID by calling dfx canister ID OpenD. And then we're going to copy the canister ID of OpenD and go into step 4 and replace everything that's in between the angle brackets, including the angle brackets, where it says replace with OpenD canister ID. And then finally, we're going to get hold of the canister ID from the previous step here. That's the ID of the NFT. And we're going to replace it in here. And notice that this time it doesn't have any double quotes around this part, so that we're calling that canister's transfer ownership method and transferring that NFT to the OpenD. So we're basically doing everything that we normally do on the front end, but this time using the command line and doing it from the back end. And hopefully that comes back as success. If it doesn't, or if any of the steps don't work, just make sure that you haven't got any aberrant angle brackets or any double quotes. The double quotes are meant to be here, but not here. So just be careful there. So now if we refresh our Discover page, you'll see our newly minted NFT that came from the command line. And because we created it from the command line, the original owner is not the same as the one that we would have when we mint it on the front end. So what this means is that we should be able to get our buy button to show up. And that's exactly what happens. Now, just for you to be able to compare, I'm going to speed through the minting and selling process just to show you the difference. So this is sped up in the editing. Don't worry, I'm not that fast. And now if we head back over to the Discover page, you can see both listed NFTs on display, but only the one where the original owner is not ourselves is available to buy. And the one that we minted ourselves, which we still own, even though we list it for sale, we still can't buy it, so that button is not there. Now, the final thing I want to do before we wrap up this lesson is to display the prices of our NFTs that are listed for sale. Because after all, how can people make a buy decision if they don't know how much things cost? In our README, if you scroll up a little bit, you should see a price label HTML. And if you simply copy it, and we're going to create a new component, which we're going to call price label.jsx. And inside here, we're going to create this component. So I'm just going to copy what I had in the button component so I don't have to rewrite a lot of this code. So import React from React function. This is called the price label, capital P, capital L. It's going to receive some props and then it's going to return. And then we've got our HTML, and then we're going to close off the function, and we're going to do export default price label. So now we can use this price label, and to start with, I just want to show you what it looks like. So just above the H2, I want you to go ahead and insert that price label component. So hopefully that has imported by itself. And now if we go onto the front end, you can see the price label showing up. Now we don't want it to always say 23. So we're going to pass this number in as a prop. So we're going to put the props.sellPrice, and coming back to our item, we're going to turn this into a price label stateful constant. So it was called price label set price label. Now, the point where we want to set our price label is when we are in our Discover section. So just below where we've done our if statement, we're going to check the price of the NFT. So that's going to involve a little bit more code in our main.matoku, where we get hold of the item price. So let's bring up our main.matoku and create a new public query function, which is called get listed NFT price, passing in the ID of the NFT and returning a natural number. So add the semicolons where you need to, and we're going to get hold of the listing in a very similar way to before. I'm going to create a variable called listing, which is of type listing, and it's going to use a switch statement to check our map of listings to get hold of the one with this ID that's passed in. In the case where it's null, in this case, we're simply going to return 0 as the price. But in the case where it does exist as an optional, then we're going to use that result and finally return the listing dot item price. And now we can call this method. I'm just going to copy it so that I can paste it in here. So I'm going to create a new const called price, and it's going to be set to equal await open d dot, paste in my method name, and then use the props.id, ID, not IDs. And now using my sell price, I can set my price label to be a new price label component, and I'm going to give it the prop of the sell price, and then setting our sell price to price, but not just the price. We have to use the toString method to change it into an actual string, because that's what the span wants to see and is able to display. So making sure that you've got the toString and the parentheses after that method call to make that conversion. So now all we have to do is hit save and redeploy because we've made some changes to our backend. And then once that's done, we have to mint a new NFT and put it up for sale. And once it's listed, on the Discover page, you'll be able to see its price being listed. There you have it. We've managed to style our Discover page to display all of the NFTs that are available for sale. We've managed to get the button to only show up when the NFT is put up for sale by somebody other than ourselves. We've got the price label set up, and we've now got a pretty good looking digital marketplace for NFTs. In the next lesson, we've got the very last aspect of this website to complete, which is the buying of NFTs, so that we can come along, transfer our DANG tokens using that token that we created in the previous module, and to be able to purchase actual NFTs and transfer the ownership. So for all of that and more, I'll see you on the next lesson.